But I'd like you to talk a little bit more about your views on social issues. You said the Conservatives generally present themselves as really fiscally in some sense, right? We're going to make government efficient. We're going to cut back taxes. We're going to let you do your own thing. And that's a negative vision. And I don't mean negative emotionally. I mean, we're here to pare things back. And that's not an expansive vision, let's say, of care in some sense. And I understand why that is. But you talked about some of the ideas you had. We briefly talked about them on the social front. So maybe I could get you to elaborate a bit on that.
I'll tell you, because I see Alberta, we've gone from, in the 1970s, having 1.5 million population to 4.5 million today. We are continuing to attract people from around the province and around the globe who I want to create Alberta as a little bastion of freedom and free enterprise amid a bit of a sea of chaos that we're seeing in North America right now. And I think that message is causing people to look here and want to come here. And so if we're going to continue growing our population, and I think we'll double if we continue this attraction by 2050. So if we're going to double our population, it means we're going to need more teachers and more nurses and more social workers and more doctors and more roads built and more schools built and more hospitals built. So talking about cutting in that framework doesn't really make much sense. What also doesn't make much sense, I don't think, is that this is what Conservatives do, is that we spend a lot of time creating an excellent business environment to attract investment and grow the amount of revenue, which is fantastic. That's one of the things that I think people can reliably count on Conservatives to do. But then what we do is we take that big pot of money and we hand it to the central planners and say, go deliver stuff. We hire the exact same people that the socialists hire. And somehow we just think, oh, well, we'll hire better central planners, without realizing that central planning is the fundamental flaw in how we're delivering our programs. And Conservatives fall victim to this all the time, is that we think, oh, well, if we just eliminate that layer of government and centralize, we'll eliminate administration and we'll end up delivering better services. And it never, ever happens. Because the more you centralize, the more you're creating layers of managers who are disconnected from delivering those services. So you end up with a very costly system that gets worse and worse results. So what I have been, I started on the free enterprise side, as I mentioned, with my internship at the Fraser Institute. So I've always been thinking, how do we apply our free enterprise values to the delivery of public programs? And if we were to apply our free enterprise values, then we would say it all begins with the individual, giving individual choice, empowering them with dollars so that they can then go and purchase the things that they need to purchase. You would have competition. You would have not only public sector providers, but nonprofit providers and charitable providers and for-profit providers all competing with each other to deliver the best service at the lowest cost. You would also make sure that we have this bizarre situation where we give all this money to a central planner, they use it to deliver services themselves, and then they evaluate their own performance and say, we're doing such a bang-up job, give us more money, and we always do. Those are not roles that in any enterprise are concentrated in one entity. You have to have a different purchaser and a different provider, and then somebody else evaluating the performance to see how you're doing. And this is the way that you apply conservative principles to how you deliver healthcare, how you deliver seniors care, how you deliver advanced education, how you deliver K-12 education. And that's the project that I want to engage and get started on. Conservatives normally shy away from these types of issues, and we normally don't put forward a vision of how we want to do it differently. And what I observe with the left, and the left does this very well, is that they will do polling on a particular issue and find that there's very little support for it. So then they go out and they advocate and they get their fellow travelers and they write columns and then they poll again. And now the support is a little bit higher. And they keep on inching up the level of support until they've got 50% plus one saying yes, and then they act on it. Whereas Conservatives do the opposite. We say, oh, we've got this idea. Let's go out and poll on it. Oh, people don't like it. Well, let's put that back on the shelf. That is not what our job is if we want to win the ideas war.
I also think that reliance on polls is also devastating to Conservatives, because Conservatives take a medium to long-term view of things, and polls sample short-term whim. And what the Conservatives need to do, I believe, in order to maintain anything even vaguely traditional, which means to maintain society itself, is to put forth the kind of vision that you were talking about today, and to and to rely much less on the hypothetical expertise of hypothetically expert pollers. You know, as a clinical and research psychologist, I know full well that asking people questions to find out what they think is way more difficult than it looks. You know, if you, as a research psychologist, if you want to find out what a group of people think about any given political issue, that probably takes one dedicated PhD researcher 2 years to manage. Because you can't just ask the questions that you think are obvious because they beg the answer. And you're not sampling anything that has any longevity in terms of attitude. And if you phrase the question slightly differently, you can get completely opposite responses. And so conservatives get set back on their heels when they do opinion polling. And I think they do that very frequently to abdicate responsibility. It's like, well, we can't do this because it's unpopular. Well, you know, maybe it's unpopular. Maybe it's your responsibility to put forth a coherent medium to long-term vision and to hope that you can communicate it well enough so that people come on board. You have to tell the right story.
You have to tell the right story, and you have to find the advocates who will help tell that story for you as well. Your audience may not know my history, but I have been in the world of public policy for 27 years. I've been at a think tank with the Fraser Institute. I've done landowner advocacy with the Canadian Property Rights Research Institute, business advocacy with a couple of different business groups. I've been in media, in print media, television media, as well as radio media. I've had my own podcast, and so I've seen I own my own business, so I've seen the full spectrum of how you try to push ideas along. And I'll tell you what I would observe is that the conservative movement has pretty well seeded the ground on so many of the culture-shaping institutions that we have in K-12 education. We don't have a large number of conservative, libertarian-minded teachers helping to connect kids with all of the different ideas that are out there, as well as all of the different jobs out there.
You have like 0 of them.
Completely. We've even pulled trades education out of most of our schools. So how is some young kid supposed to know he wants to be an electrician or a plumber or a welder if he doesn't have access to the opportunities to try it out? So that's one thing that we've seeded. We've also seeded the universities, and you know this probably better than anyone else, how difficult it is to get your research funded if you happen to have something beyond woke views. It seems like there's only one particular type of research that gets funded these days. So our universities, I don't think, are giving us the support that we need in the conservative and libertarian movement. On top of that, all of our arts organizations, our filmmakers, the messages that come through all of our Hollywood and other popular film is almost uniformly negative to conservative ideals or capitalism or liberty. Although there are some notable exceptions, and then of course I think as well we haven't cultivated our friends in the union movement in the way that we should have, because increasingly they're having the same conservative values that we're talking about here. And so I feel like so many of the different forces that shape society and shape the conversation, I should add media. I mean, media as well. I remember years ago, Lydia Miljan, who was a researcher at one of the Ontario universities, but she worked for the Fraser Institute. It's almost like a mirror image of how many people in the media self-describe as being atheist or agnostic compared to the general public. And that shapes the kind of stories that get told. So all of the opinion shaping that is done by and large by the progressive side of the spectrum. Even on the advocacy groups, we have far more active advocacy groups on environmental and social issues from a leftist perspective than we have from a libertarian conservative perspective. So when I'm talking about the things that I need to do to try to advance the message, but I'm not going to succeed unless we also have the backup. We need to have the advocacy groups and the think tanks and the academics in the universities, and we need to be hiring teachers and filmmakers who are going to tell our stories. And I think that this is a 20 or 30-year project, because it took 20 or 30 years to get to the place we are right now. It's going to take 20 or 30 years to get us to some sort of balance. But we've got to start by recognizing the nature of the problem we created for ourselves and starting to undo it.